My Airbnb horror story. A little backstory. I am from Italy and was in my third year of nursing school. We were given the opportunity to do an internship in another country, in a unit of our choice, if our grades were good. So I was among the lucky ones who got to stay in Munich, Germany. Of course, we then had to search for accommodation during our stay. For everyone who has ever been to Munich, apartment prices are pretty high, and we had to find a place under €50 per night, which was not too far from the hospital in case we had to do night shifts or early morning shifts because of public transportation. Months before my arrival in the city, I searched on Airbnb and found a room only 2 subway stops away from the hospital, which also had a pretty fair price. Plus, the host was a superhost. I'm not very familiar with Airbnb, but I guess a superhost is a host with a lot of good reviews. I contacted her, let's name her Anne, and everything seemed pretty fine, though we mainly talked about the transaction and why I was staying in the city. Also, she told me she lives with her boyfriend, let's name him James, both in their 50s. Looking at the reviews, everything seemed pretty fine, and I decided to book the room. I planned on arriving in the city by bus and got onto the bus in Italy, but there was so much traffic that I ended up arriving nearly 3 hours later than planned in Munich. Of course, I notified Anne about arriving later than planned, and again, everything was fine. She just told me the address and to call her when I was there. It was pretty hot that day, and I was happy to finally arrive. I called her on her number, and when she picked up, there was a man's voice. At first, I was perplexed, but the man told me he was James, Anne's boyfriend, and instructed me to take the lift to the 7th floor. So I did, and I finally got to the door. He opened the door, and we introduced ourselves and made a little small talk near the door. Already, small talk with James seemed a little weird because he had a strange sense of humor, but I told myself, he's probably in his 50s, and maybe that's normal? Then he showed me my room, the kitchen, and the bathroom. The bathroom had a glass door. He then told me to meet him in the kitchen. So the small talk continued in the kitchen, and James still had this weird way of talking. When I told him I was going to do my internship in an ICU, he stated things like, "Oh yeah, I'm a hunter, and when I shoot something and have to eviscerate it, it's quite similar to an operation on a human." In disbelief at what he had just said, I replied, "No, from my point of view, not really." He was just like, "Yes, it is." When he spoke, it sometimes seemed like he always wanted to be right. Then he asked me if I wanted a beer and told me a story about getting drunk with a guest before me and how that guest fell down the escalator, smashing his head pretty hard. It continued pretty much like that, with him drinking his 3rd beer at this point. At one point I thought, "Where is Anne?" I asked him, "Isn't she here?" He then told me, "Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention, I was riding with you before you arrived using her phone." Then I asked, "Okay, but where is she?" He told me in an annoyed voice, and decided to get drunk today while I was trying to watch my football game in peace. Then she smashed her head on the edge of the main room and is now in the emergency room. He said he was going to pick her up, and I asked him the name of the hospital. It happened to be the hospital where I was starting tomorrow, so I told him, "Oh, what a coincidence. I'm starting my internship there tomorrow. I'm coming with you so I know the way to go tomorrow." I also wanted to know if Anne still existed and if she was really there. Everything from there on went pretty quickly. Before we kind of left, he showed me the living room, and another important thing about this apartment was that they had carpeted floors. To get to their bedroom, you had to pass through the living room, and on the left side, just at the entrance to their bedroom, there were 2 pools of blood on the floor and blood on the doorframe. He then asked me weird questions like if I knew how to get blood out of the carpet. I told him, "I don't know, I've never had to do this before. I guess you need a special cleaner or cut it out." He then told me that before leaving, he had to get some beers from his garage, so I waited in my room. I thought about going into the living room and taking a picture of the blood on the floor, but I was afraid he might have cameras or something, so I just waited until he came back. I took a new pair of leggings out of my backpack, and I kind of had to bend over a little when I heard his voice from the door to my room saying, he said this in German, "Da hast du aber ein schönes Kätzchen." This means something like, "You've got a nice kitty cat right there." I said, "What?" He then repeated himself, saying the exact same thing, and I asked, "What cat?" He said, "Yeah, the kitty cat," and I just looked at him with a baffled face. He then told me, "Your tattoo." I have a tattoo on my lower leg with a fairy-like creature, but not a cat. Now I was irritated and also annoyed by his behavior, and I said, "That's not a cat." He also made other comments about my other tattoos, signaling that he liked them, I guess. He then stressed that we should leave for the hospital, so I made a mistake and left my 2 backpacks there. One with just clothing and the other with belongings of value in the room. We arrived at the emergency room, and I was standing next to him, asking about Anne. The nurse then told him, "Well, finally you arrived. They stitched her wound, but she acted out of her mind the whole time, and she will be coming soon." I was kind of relieved that she was, in fact, there, but I thought, why didn't she tell me? Why did this incident happen? I thought about domestic violence, of course, and hoped to talk to her soon so the whole situation could be cleared up. And also, why was he acting so weird? So James and I waited together. Minutes passed by, and other new patients arrived. 2 young female paramedics entered the ER wearing their uniforms, and he then told me, "Look at these 2. I like their uniforms. They show their good-looking bodies." I don't know how to perfectly translate it, but in German he said, "Schau dir dies Arbeitsuniformen, richtig schön und so schön körperbedient." Also, James changed the timeline of his story 2 or 3 times. So considering one timeline, if my bus had had no delay, would I have arrived at their place at the time the incident happened? And welcoming me completely smashed drunk? We waited and waited, and then he proceeded to ask again about Anne. The nurse then told him that she had discharged herself. James rushed to me and told me we had to go back home because Anne had discharged herself and was surely waiting at the house without keys or her phone, because he obviously had it. I then told him I was staying a little longer so I could know the way for tomorrow. He left, and I stayed at the hospital, telling everything to my boyfriend, my parents, and a friend. She was studying with me but staying at a different hostel in the city. My boyfriend told me not to go back there, not even for one night, because the whole situation was just not normal. My parents were obviously worried but told me that maybe I just needed to clear up the situation. They also told me that if I did go back, I should look out for a key in my bedroom. I also begged a nurse in the ER, explaining to her that I was starting an internship in this hospital tomorrow and asked if she could tell me anything about the situation or if she would go back there herself. She told me that, of course, due to privacy reasons, she couldn't say much, but that I should definitely look for another place to stay and that I should not go back there. Fast forward. My friend offered to come with me to at least get my backpack with my belongings of value. So that same evening, around 8:30 p.m., we went back there. I was hoping to find in there and clear up the whole situation, but when I entered the apartment, he had given me the key before he left the hospital. All the lights were already out, and I snuck into my room. To my surprise, no key was in my bedroom door. I grabbed my backpack and headed back out of there, leaving my other backpack behind. When I was in the room, I tried to hear if someone was still awake, but there was nothing. I stayed the night at the hostel with my friend and another girl who was studying with us. For 2 days, I heard nothing from Anne or James. But they must have noticed pretty well that I was never at home because all the bed sheets were still as I had found and left them. During those 2 days, I already had to work, and besides that, I had to look for different accommodation, which is pretty difficult in Munich. I had also spent all my money on the last one and was already in touch with Airbnb support. I had whole 2-3 hour conversations with the Airbnb support team, with recorded calls and a translator to describe my situation. They were very helpful, and it seemed like they really cared. While searching for a new room, I got frustrated because everything was way out of my price range, and I thought I might have to stop my internship and go back home. But then, my boyfriend finally found something on the 3rd day. I was so happy because the 2 girls had already been so kind to let me stay at their place. It was really small. They slept together in a French bed, and on the first night, we slept there in 3, but it was really small, so I decided to sleep on the hard, cold floor with no blanket for 2 nights. Plus, we always had to get up early and work pretty much until the afternoon. So, I had my new room now, and it was time to get the other backpack. Airbnb support told me not to go back alone or to ask at a local police station if an officer could escort me to get my stuff safely. So I did that, explained my situation, and asked, but they, who would have thought, denied my request. Thanks for nothing and fuck you. My friend once again offered to come with me. I forgot to mention that on the third day, the day I went to get my stuff, and wrote me a message asking, "Is everything okay? Are you still alive?" I then told her I was at work and would come over later because I wanted to have a conversation with her. When I entered the apartment, I finally saw, and for the first time, she was holding a glass of wine, wearing sunglasses, and I saw her stitched wound. James was also there, standing silently in the doorway of the kitchen. I told him everything from my point of view and apologized in case, for some odd reason, this was a misunderstanding, but I didn't feel safe and was leaving. She laughed and said some weird things, claiming it had nothing to do with domestic violence and that she found it funny that, as a nurse, I would think like that because, in my field, I should know better. She laughed everything off, blaming and accusing me of surely having found something cheaper in Munich and using that as an excuse to leave. She mumbled more things, but I was just so done with these two people, took my stuff, and left. James stayed silent as a mouse and couldn't even say anything. Thankfully, Airbnb gave me all my money back and was overall just really helpful. Honestly, I didn't expect that, but they were really kind and understanding.